Hey guys, in this video, I'm going to talk about the importance of web hosting for your WordPress site speed. And then I'm going to go over a couple of my recommended web hosts for WordPress and give you a comparison between the two. So let's get right into it. Hey, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Jake Full, and I built a six-figure blogging business all on the side while I was working my 9-to-5 job. And I was able to quit my job and go full-time as an entrepreneur, doing what I love every single day. And I want to teach you exactly how to do the same. And so if that sounds interesting, make sure to click the link in the description below and sign up for my free 30-minute blogging masterclass. It's an entire overview of blogging and affiliate marketing and how easy it is to get your own website started, create a brand online, and start generating passive income every single month, because I have built entire website templates in a box that you can import in less than 1 minute. And then I also have over 400 individual website templates that you can mix and match however you would like to create pages and blog posts 10 times faster than anybody else out there. And so make sure to click that link in the description below and get signed up for the free training. And let's get back to the video. All right, so let's talk about web hosting and how it is the foundation of your WordPress site speed. If someone came up to me and asked me, Jake, if you could change only one thing to improve your WordPress site speed, what would you change? I would reply with hosting every single time. Hosting is the foundation of your WordPress site speed, and it is the #1 factor that relates to your core web vitals and other things that are going to help you get a Google ranking boost. If you don't have good hosting, your site is going to be slow no matter how many optimizations you do to it. I see people do this all the time. I see people posting in WordPress site speed groups on Facebook, and they say, hey, I've added this caching plugin and I've done this thing with my images, but my site speed is still slow. And come to find out, they're using a very, very slow WordPress web host, and that is what is ultimately slowing down all of their numbers and making them fail core web vitals. So let's pretend for a second that your WordPress site is like a skyscraper. You can build the tallest, most elegant building in the world, but if the foundation of that building is sand, the building is going to completely collapse upon itself. And so that is why it is so important to have a good web host from the get-go, because that is going to serve as the base for your speed and everything going forward. And people's attention spans on the internet are getting shorter and shorter as time goes on. And so the faster you can make your website, the more visitors you will get, the more it will sell, and your users will have a better experience on your site overall. And so that's a triple win. And you hear different e-commerce brands such as Amazon talk all the time about the importance of site speed. And they've done insane studies that things such as 0.1 seconds of load time greatly decreases their overall conversions. So now that we know a little bit about web hosting and how it is the foundation of your WordPress site speed, let's talk about some web hosting that you should absolutely avoid. So you should stay far, far, far away from any hosting that is owned by EIG, which is Endurance International Group. Now, the two most common WordPress web hosts that are owned by EIG are both Bluehost and HostGator. And I actually started with both of these when I first got started blogging back in 2014. The very first host I used was HostGator, and my site speed was absolutely terrible. And I was using a third-party page builder, which was making things even worse. And because I knew nothing about web hosting at the time, I just figured that the different tools I used or other factors were slowing down my website. And then after being on HostGator for a couple of years, I switched over to Bluehost, and I didn't think that it could get any worse than being on HostGator. But believe it or not, Bluehost was even worse than HostGator, and my site speed got even slower, and I ran into so many issues on Bluehost. And I finally started to learn about web hosting and what a good web host looks like. So you might be wondering, why should you stay away from these EIG-owned web hosts? So #1 is they have absolutely terrible performance. #2 is they have horrible customer service, and you hear so many people that have issues and wait a long, long time trying to get answers from either a support chat or a support ticket that they emailed in, and it's just not worth wasting the time. In fact, you should be looking for a web host that has absolutely amazing customer service, because that is what is going to help when you run into issues, is having a fantastic support team that can run you through the issue and get you up and running in no time. The third thing is that these hosts have extremely limited resources, and this is something that I see over and over again. In fact, we are going to be using Cadence for our website, and I have seen so many people that try to import in a Cadence starter template and they get this 503 error. And they think that this error is on Cadence's end, but it's actually because of their web host. And so Bluehost is the #1 host that I see with issues when it comes to importing in Cadence starter templates, because they give you such limited resources that it can't even import in the theme correctly. Number 4 is you are going to run into a vast array of unknown issues. And this is another thing that I see all of the time, and I see people running into all of these random issues or errors on their website, database errors and things like that. And they go and contact a group on Facebook or somewhere else and they say, hey, I'm running into these issues. I talked to support and they said that it wasn't on them. Well, many times it almost certainly is on the web hosting, and they are just trying to avoid the issues. And number 5 is they usually have shoddy security protocols. So they are not held to the same standards as other more premium hosts are for security. And that is just bad news, because you absolutely do not want to have your website get hacked or have to deal with that. It is an absolute mess, and you are going to spend so much time trying to get things figured out and get your site back, if you can even get your site back. And so you absolutely do not want to go through the risk of being on a web host that does not hold itself to high security standards. If there are any marketers promoting these hosts, such as Bluehost and HostGator, do not trust them. I have seen this so many times with all these marketing gurus out there that promote Bluehost on their websites, and it is just absolutely atrocious to see this. And it hurts, because I have been through these hosts. I have been doing WordPress for over 10 years, and I cannot stand people that promote Bluehost. And the only reason they are doing it is because Bluehost has one of the highest affiliate commission rates. And so if you see anybody promoting a host such as Bluehost, they are doing it for the money, and they are not doing it because they have your best interests in mind. Because if they did have your best interests in mind, they would absolutely be promoting other better web hosts, but they don't want to do that because it's not going to make them as much money. So if you are on one of these hosts, or you have a slow host, your #1 priority right now should be to switch over to a better host. And I'm going to go over my 2 recommended hosting options for WordPress and give you a little comparison between the two. And so one last note is you get what you pay for with web hosting. So many people only want to spend about $2 a month on web hosting, which I believe Bluehost costs somewhere around there. And all that is going to do is give you issues, and you are going to be spending hours of your life trying to get things fixed, and it's just not worth it. So just invest a few more dollars a month into web hosting, and I promise it will be worth it. And so one tool I like to use to determine how fast my hosting is this performance tool from KeyCDN. And you can access this by going to tools.keycdn.com/performance. And so this is a nice little performance test where you can just enter a URL and it will give you some performance numbers. And so let's just go through an example here. I'm going to enter in Start Blogging 101 here. So I've entered in startblogging101.com. Make sure you enter in the HTTPS, and then I also included a slash at the end, and I'm going to click test here. All right, so the test came back here, and I've zoomed in a little bit so that you can see it. And you can see there are a number of different columns here. And so the very first column is location. And so these are servers in these various locations. The status number of 200 just means that they successfully connected and went through on all of these. The DNS column is your DNS lookup time. And so this is the amount of time that it took to look up your website. And this number gets smaller and smaller, which is a good thing when you use Cloudflare. And so you can see a lot of these numbers are anywhere from 11 to only 20 milliseconds. There's a couple that are in the 50 millisecond range, but that is very, very fast. And you will find that if you use a different registrar for your domain name, such as Namecheap or something like this, this is going to be probably in the 1 to 200 millisecond range. And that's probably not going to seem like a lot to you. That's only 0.1 seconds faster. But we just talked about how every single second and millisecond counts for your WordPress site speed. And that 100 milliseconds that you save just by going through Cloudflare might be the difference that helps you pass Core Web Vitals on your website and get you a Google ranking boost. Here are my connection times, which are very, very fast. In fact, all of them are under 4 milliseconds. The TLS column here is how long it took for the TLS connection to take place, which is security. And then your TTFB, this is the most important factor here, and that stands for time to first byte. And so that's how how long it took from the moment the request was made until it received the first byte back from the server. And if you need an explanation of what these columns mean, you can actually scroll down here and they gave a quick little explanation for each of these acronyms here. But if we scroll back up and look at the TTFB here, you can see that all of these are less than 200 milliseconds, and many of the ones around where I live in the US are right around 50 to 60 milliseconds, which is unbelievably fast. And the reason my numbers are so fast is because my site is hosted with Rocket.net, which is one of my recommended web hosts that I will compare in a slide here shortly. And so here's a little description that I wrote on one of my hosting pages that talk about this a little more. So if you look at the rightmost column labeled TTFB and you note the times, you should check the time to first byte times closest to your hosting server location. So I have a little guide here that says if it's less than 200 milliseconds, you have excellent hosting and you do not need to change hosting. If it's anywhere in the 200 to 600 millisecond range, it's okay, but you might want to consider faster hosting. And if it's higher than 600 milliseconds, your time to first byte is very poor and you should absolutely upgrade to faster hosting. So for example, Start Blogging 101 is hosted on a server in Chicago, Illinois. And so if we go back here and if we look at the different locations that are closest to our server in the US here, you can see that it's 59 milliseconds for New York and 53 milliseconds for San Francisco. And if we hop back here to that hosting page, you can see that those are less than 200 milliseconds. And in fact, we actually have less than 200 milliseconds for every single global location, which is absolutely crazy. And that's because of using Rocket.net, which I will talk more about, like I said. But let's jump back to the hosting page here. And because all of those times are below 200 milliseconds, my hosting performance is excellent. And so I would at least recommend putting your website through this performance test and looking at your DNS lookup times, seeing what your TTFB or your time to first byte is, and comparing those numbers and see if you could benefit from faster web hosting. And so now let's compare the two different web hosting companies that I recommend for WordPress. Number one is Siteground and number two is Rocket.net. So number one, Siteground. I have had websites hosted through Siteground for I believe over 8 years now, and they are a tried and true web hosting company. They are not owned by EIG, and so they are much, much better than a host such as Bluehost or HostGator. In fact, after I first started on HostGator, I said that I had swapped over to Bluehost, which was even worse. And then after Bluehost, I finally discovered Siteground many years ago, and I have been very, very happy with Siteground. They are extremely beginner friendly, and they have fantastic customer service. And so it is an excellent host to get started with. So let's go through this column here, and I will just explain some of these and what they mean. So number one, for ease of use, Siteground is absolutely rated excellent because they are by far one of the easiest hosts to use. And that is one of the main reasons why I recommend Siteground to beginners who are just getting started with blogging. The second row here is speed, and Siteground is listed yellow as okay. And the reason for that is because Siteground is not the fastest host that you can have out there. Siteground uses what is called shared hosting, and so a lot of your resources are shared with different people, and so that is what ultimately will not give you the fastest speeds out there. But the trade-off is that shared hosting is cheaper than other hosting where you have dedicated resources such as Rocket.net. And you're probably wondering, but didn't you just say that web hosting is the number one factor for your speed and everything? And yes, that is true. And if you are going to be on Siteground, your chances of passing Core Web Vitals are not honestly very good. You can pass Core Web Vitals while using Siteground, but just know that it's going to take more work and it's probably not worth that effort, especially when you're first starting out. The third row here is support, and Siteground has absolutely incredible support. I have contacted their support team dozens of times in the last 8 years of being hosted with them, and they have saved me from I think around 5 different emergencies where my site was completely down and they fixed it within less than a few minutes. And for security here, I have Siteground marked as good. They have very, very good security. In fact, they even have a separate dedicated security plugin that comes included with their hosting plans. The reason that I have them marked good rather than excellent is because you do need to tweak a few things for the security, and I would recommend using an additional security plugin such as WordFence, for example, which I'll get into showing you how to set up, but it just needs a little more tweaking to have a fully robust system. Now for a caching plugin here, a caching plugin is something that is going to help speed up your website, and it's going to provide a number of optimizations on the front end that are going to help speed up your website as well. And with Siteground plans, they have an included caching plugin, and it's called SG Optimizer or Siteground Optimizer. And so that's really nice that they include a caching plugin with their web hosting. And so that helps you save a little bit of money. And I do have an entire guide with all of the best settings for the SG Optimizer when you do get around to setting that up. For the number of sites, you get unlimited with Siteground, and I have an asterisk by that. And that's because of the shared hosting aspect that I mentioned before. And so yes, you can have technically unlimited websites, but the more websites that you add, that is going to start consuming more and more resources. And so eventually you will have to likely upgrade to a higher plan. But I do like the unlimited aspect of Siteground because there are many times that I want to just create like a little test website and play around with something. And it's really, really easy to spin up an additional website with Siteground and be able to toy around. And for the price here, you can see I have $6 a month and then $30 a month. And I'll talk about this in the video where I show you step-by-step how to set up Siteground. But the very first year of service with Siteground, you get a promotional period. And for that promotional period for their Grow Big plan, which is the plan that I recommend and I'll go over, that is around $6 a month for the first year. And so it's really nice to only be able to spend around $70 to $80 for hosting for the first year. But then after your first year, it goes up to the regular pricing, which is right now around $30 a month. And personally, I believe that for $30 a month, I think you can get a lot better hosting, at least better speed, and that's with Rocket.net, which I'll talk about next. But one of the main reasons why I recommend Siteground for beginners is because if you are just getting started and you are on a budget and you want to spend less money on your hosting for the first year, then I would highly recommend Siteground because of how easy it is to get set up and get going. And although they do not have the absolute top speeds out there, the speed of your website, at least in your first year when you're just getting started, is probably not as important as when you are a couple of years into your blog and you have a ton of articles and you're really competitively trying to get different rankings in Google. And so now let's talk about Rocket.net. And so for ease of use, I also have them listed as excellent. They are a very beginner-friendly host as well. Once you get set up with them, there's hardly anything that you need to tweak and everything just works and it's unbelievably fast. So that is one of the main reasons why I absolutely love Rocket.net. Their speed is excellent. In fact, this should be even beyond excellent because they are by far one of the fastest hostings out there for the money. And in my setup video where I tell you step-by-step how to set up Rocket.net, I will go a little bit more into the speed and why they're so fast. But just know that for the money, Rocket.net is one of the fastest web hosts out there. And that makes it very, very easy to pass Core Web Vitals and get a Google ranking boost on your site and your blog posts. For support, they are also listed as excellent. They have some of the best support that I have ever run into. I migrated multiple sites over to them, and it took literally less than 20 minutes to get my entire site migrated over onto their platform and their servers. And they have been very, very responsive. I get connected to them in less than 30 seconds, and they are extremely knowledgeable when it comes to different topics regarding WordPress or security or speed or a number of different things. For security, they are listed excellent, and that's even better than SiteGround. And the reason for that is their infrastructure is run through enterprise Cloudflare. And you don't really need to know the specifics of that. I talk about that more in the Rocket.net setup video, but they have super robust systems in place for security. In fact, you don't even need to put an additional security plugin on your website if you don't want, because they have such high standards and different measures put in place to prevent brute force attacks and a number of different security issues. And so for a caching plugin, they do not include a caching plugin with their web hosting, but that's actually okay because I highly, highly recommend Flying Press, and we'll get into that. It is by far one of the best caching plugins out there. The only downfall is it does have an additional cost to it, but I think it is well worth the money that you pay for it. And that is going to be that final thing that gives you that extra boost and lets you pass Core Web Vitals. For a number of sites, you'll see that with their starter plan, which I go over in the setup video, you get one site. And I know that might seem limited, but you're only going to be focusing on one main website for your blog. And ultimately, if you do end up needing more sites, you can very easily upgrade to a higher plan. And for the price here, it's $30 a month. And it's actually cheaper if you do decide to pay for an entire year up front. And I know that might seem like a ton of money, and maybe it is. And that's okay if you do decide that you want to go with Siteground. But if you have the budget to pay $30 a month for hosting, I promise that starting with Rocket.net is going to be one of the best things that you can do for your website just starting out. And right from the get-go, you're going to have unbelievable speeds like I showed you with that performance test. And your speed and your security and everything is all taken care of for you. And so I think you'll find that you hardly ever need to go into Rocket.net to contact them for anything or change anything, because everything just works. And so that's all I have for this video. We talked about the importance of web hosting and how it is the foundation of your WordPress site speed. We talked about the different web hosts you should avoid, such as Bluehost and HostGator, because they're owned by EIG. We went over a performance test to show you your different DNS lookup times and your TTFB, which is your time to first byte. And then we compared the two different web hosting companies that I recommend for WordPress, which is Siteground and Rocket.net. And in the next videos, I'll show you how to set up your web host. So if you decide to go with Siteground, I have a step-by-step video for that. Or if you decide to go with Rocket.net, I also have a step-by-step video for that. That's all I have for this video. I'll see you guys in the next one.